Hello, everyone, and welcome to Techstrong TV. Today is Monday, November 7th, and I hope you're all having a wonderful day so far. I'm your host, William Willis, and in today's show, we're going to bring you some fantastic interviews with incredible guests from around the world, so stay tuned. As always, I'm going to start off with our Techstrong News recap, filling you in on the biggest tech headlines that are making waves. Then we will go over to Alan, where he sits down with Vince Aranezia, CPO at Grammatech, to talk about Grammatech's newest product, Code Sentry, a supply chain security platform that can scan production applications to produce SBOMs, identify associated open source vulnerabilities, and license information. Alan will then speak with Lorelei Katapan, VP of Product at ActiveState, to discuss ActiveState's release of ActiveState Artifact Repository to enable organizations to securely build Python dependencies directly from source code. Then we go to Open Source Summit Europe, where Mike met with Ana Jimenez Santamaria, Program Manager for Open Source Program Offices in the Toto Group within the Linux Foundation, where Ana explains how best practices for setting up an open source program office are shared. We're then joined by our very own Cody J. Brown, who will hop on and tell us more about some of our upcoming webinars. Next up, we are airing episode 3 of our series, Engineering the Change. This series will follow the 3 winners of the Engineering the Change Scholarship Program as they tackle a 10-week intensive coding bootcamp and prepare themselves for careers in software engineering. Then we will wrap up this broadcast with 3 episodes of View with Vizard. In the first episode, Mike interviews Stamus Network CTO Eric LeBond and CSO Peter Manet as they discuss why a more introductory network security using Suricata book was needed to help make the open source intrusion detection, intrusion prevention platform more accessible. Then, Mike interviews the newly appointed Percona CEO, Ann Schlemmer, where Ann explains what it takes to deploy and manage open source databases in the enterprise. Finally, Mike interviews Thrive CTO, Michael Gray, where Michael explains what it really takes to implement a zero-trust cybersecurity model across what has become a highly distributed computing environment. And that's what we have coming up for you on this episode of Techstrong TV. So without further ado, let's get the show started. Enjoy.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
Hi again, everyone. Here are the headlines for November 7th. First up, TikTok updated its privacy policy for users in Europe to state that workers in China can remotely access user data. TikTok has stated that the company uses said data for what it claims are important functions and keeping user experience consistent and safe. This announcement emerges only months ahead of the expected draft decision of the year-long investigation into the platform through the General Data Protection Regulation probe. TikTok says that this change is based on providing transparency to how TikTok uses data, though this is happening as there is a growing regulatory scrutiny towards the platforms and data security from China. It will be important to keep our eyes on this development in the next few months to see what happens as far as the GDPR probe is concerned. Next, Amazon has decided to freeze corporate hirings for retail businesses for the rest of 2022 from a predicted rough economy. The hiring freeze includes corporate and technology positions for retail and operations divisions. Amazon's cloud and warehouse divisions, however, are expected to remain unaffected. Approximately 20,000 openings were available before the freeze started. It seems like Amazon has joined the likes of other big tech companies to lower hiring. This being said, Amazon predicts that jobs will come back at the beginning of the new year. While on the subject of hiring practices, the ride-hailing company Lyft has announced that it is laying off 13% of its workforce. Lyft currently has over 4,000 employees, and the layoffs are expected to affect many roles throughout the company. This layoff, though, does not currently include drivers. Logan Green, the Lyft CEO, has said that a probable recession and the increasing cost of ride-sharing insurance are the main reasons for the layoffs. Lyft hasn't been doing so hot either, as its stock price is down nearly 70% over the past year, too. This all goes to show how companies across different industries are getting hit by the current economy. Next up, OpenAI has opened up its AI to text image generation to be more available to businesses with a public beta launch of its API. OpenAI has said that the API will make it easier for companies to add DALL-E's text-to-image functionality to products. Zooming out, the adoption of text-to-image and even text-to-video AI has grown considerably. However, as this type of AI grows, so does the dangers of spreading misinformation and ethical questions regarding its data use. Regardless, though, it seems that this technology is going to stay with us for the time being. On Digital CXO, we have an article looking at how to use proactive services. Over the past 2 years, the work world has gone through many changes that have put pressure on the field and service teams. In a world where there's a rapidly retiring workforce, a younger workforce expecting flexibility, and customers that want fast, personalized service, it shows the importance of business agility, and proactive services is one way to do that. This article looks at some of the ways that top service organizations are using proactive services. To learn more, go to digitalcxo.com. On Security Boulevard, we have an article looking at a survey that showcases how malware, ransomware, and IoT pose major IT security challenges. A recent threat report by SonicWall shows that more than 4 billion malware attempts were made globally in 2022 so far. Additionally, year-to-year ransomware attempts have exceeded the full year totals from the past 4 of 5 years. To learn more about these troubling findings and their implications, go to securityboulevard.com. Finally, on DevOps.com, we have an article looking at how Memento launched an elastic serverless cache platform to improve the performance of applications running on databases deployed in the cloud. Memento has said that the goal is to give IT teams access to a serverless computing framework for accessing a cache memory that can be used to improve the interactivity of applications. To learn more, go to devops.com. And that's today's Techstrong News Recap.
DevOps.com is the #1 online destination for DevOps education and community building. DevOps.com covers all aspects of DevOps, including DevOps best practices and tools, DevOps culture, DevSecOps, business impact, continuous testing, continuous delivery, and more. DevOps.com has the largest collection of original DevOps content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.devops.com to learn more. DevOps.com, where the world meets DevOps.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Techstrong TV. I want to introduce you to a gentleman. It's the first time here on Techstrong, but it's not the first time we've covered the company. It's Grammatech. We're going to talk about that. But let me introduce you to Vince Arnesia. Vince is Chief Product Officer, CPO at Grammatech. And hey Vince, welcome to Techstrong TV.
Thank you, Alan. It's a pleasure to be here. I've watched many of these, and I'm excited about participating finally.
We're excited to have you on here. So, you know, Vince, some people in our audience may have heard of Grammatech. It kind of it's in our sweet spot, right, of AppSec and DevSecOps and so forth. But not everyone, I'm sure, has, or maybe they have and they're not sure. Would you mind if we go kind of fundamentals at first and give us a little company background?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So Grammatech has been around for a while, 20 plus years. It really started out as a company spun out of academia, Cornell, University of Wisconsin. A couple of professors got together and decided to formulate a company that would do a lot of research for the government, you know, with DARPA, ONR, those kinds of research agencies. And so really that's how the company formulated. And eventually, as they started to do this research, they started to create a product division, and a static analysis capability was born called Code Sonar, and really started to lay the foundation for the uniqueness that Grammatech has historically brought and still brings, which is around application security scanning, source code, binary code. And we've kind of built on that the last few years since myself and a few others have come on board the management team.
I'm going to talk to you about that in a second. But before we do, why don't we tell people a little bit about your background?
Sure. Yeah. So I'm kind of a cyber geek. I've been in cyber security since 2001. I've been in various aspects of cyber, primarily application security. I'd say of the 20 plus years in cyber, I'd say about 14 or so are in application security, including, of course, Grammatech. Previously, I was at Arxan, where we did a lot of in-app protection and protection of mobile apps as the application became the new perimeter back in 2011, 2012. And so, yeah, I mean, I've been in cyber a long time, and my role is really to head up product. So in some vendors where I've been involved with, it's product management, product strategy. In this particular case, it's also product engineering and other facets of product. And as you might have seen with a lot of your interviews, the CPO role has evolved quite a bit. It's now not just encompassing product management. It's really encompassing all of aspects of product. And that's kind of how we do it here at Grammatech. So it's been fun. I've been here 3 years. We've really sort of turned the company into a product-focused company versus a research-only company. We still do a lot of research, but it's a good blend, and I'm glad to be part of the team doing that.
Absolutely. Look, that's one of the reasons we started the whole digital CXO website. Property we started because of the changing roles of
Right.
the CPO, the chief product. We see a lot of organizations where the CPO is the CTO as well.
Yes.
Right? Your chief technology officer actually runs product.
Yeah.
And sometimes engineering as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
And
in one head.
yeah, I've seen that over the last 5 or 6 years. The CPO role has kind of taken over engineering, product management, really looking at the capabilities that you need to build from an outsider's perspective. Because the CTO historically has a very technical lens, and it doesn't always lend itself to what the customer or the market needs. And so I think that's the shift we're starting to see a little bit. We'll see if it continues, but that's what we're currently sensing.
Yeah, no, there's that. Then there's this whole chief data and chief digital officer. And, this is why we call it CXO. It's a very different kind of thing. Hey, I know we want to talk about this new product coming out of Grammatech, but I got into a conversation the other day with a CEO of a company. It was around this whole shift left, shift right. When do you scan? What do you scan when? And look, AppSec scanning and shifting that left has been sort of the bread and butter, the heart of this DevSecOps movement.
Right.
And also in 2001, I founded a company, Still Secure, out in Colorado. And I think it was in 2003 we launched a vulnerability scanner. But that was to scan stuff after, in production.
Right.
That was to scan your assets out there, your
Servers,
your footprint. A big thing, AppSec came.
And
the
the
idea of scanning pre-deployment. Wow.
Right.
Like a mind blower.
Yeah.
And now over the years, OWASP, everything, we've seen AppSec really grow up. You've got static scanning, static code analysis, as you mentioned. You've got software composition analysis, right? Open source stuff. You have dynamic scanning.
Right.
And then a lot of vendors have their own little initials for the kind of scanning they do. But this gentleman yesterday said that doing dynamic scanning pre-deployment was just wasteful.
Yeah.
Interested, agree, disagree, why?
Well, so I mean, these are subjective views, right? We all come from a different lens, if you will. We're looking at it differently. I mean, to me, different types of applications lend themselves to different types of scanning. We primarily play in sort of the embedded arena, where you're talking about automotive, aerospace, government, and those kinds of applications are more running lower level code. And so static analysis and software composition analysis is absolutely paramount. Dynamic or interactive doesn't really apply to those types of use cases and those kinds of applications, whereas it obviously does when you're talking about web applications and things of that nature. So I feel like it really comes down to the computing platform and the application that you're creating and the target audience and which of those different types of sort of AST capabilities is primary versus secondary. And so I think it comes down that to me is really the right answer versus, hey, this one technology is great regardless of use case or technology or computing platform.
Never black and white.
Exactly.
Right.
Excellent. All right. Hey, Vince, I got to turn over the rest of this interview to you now. You've got some exciting news to tell us about Grammatech, and go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. So as somebody that's in the space, you're well aware of the sort of recent, I'd say, in the last 18 months or so, supply chain security attacks. SolarWinds. We had obviously a big effect there from with Sunburst and that whole SolarWinds event. We had which occurred last year as well. There was a different malware scanner. So all these different sort of known supply chain and security attacks that took place in the last 18 months have led to more of an emphasis, right? We've seen the government step in with the EO 14028.
Yep.
We've seen follow up from that. That's actually actionable and tangible now after that came out in May of 21. And so what we're seeing is, in my opinion, this is just my 2 cents, we're seeing that zero trust mindset that has for the last 10 years been applied to network security or cloud security. We're seeing that zero trust mindset, not necessarily architecture, but mindset applied to applications. And so obviously, to your point just now, when you're building your applications, you've already shifted left, or you're planning to, in order to have security take place right in the snippet of code that the developer's coding. But what about the third-party applications? What about the supply chain applications that are a critical part of your ecosystem that you've kind of blindly trusted? Well, it seems like, at least from the things we're seeing and talking to customers about, that mindset is shifting to a zero trust as well. And that I know this vendor, I trust them, but I'm still going to make sure the code is what they say it is. Exactly. And so in some cases, you trust a vendor, you still want to verify. In some cases, you might have a smaller division using an application that you don't even trust. And so you want to do verification on that. So we're seeing, and that's kind of called, a high risk profile application. So we're seeing that mindset shift to where customers, large Fortune 1000 companies are looking at this and saying, we have to do something about this, not just the code that we're writing, but let's put a plan in place so that we're less susceptible to supply chain attacks. We can proactively get ahead of what the vendors are giving us and take it from there.
So look, this whole SBOM thing,
yeah,
right, is blown up as a result of this, right?
Yes.
It's a guy out of the government, Alan Friedman. He was with us at RSA last year. He's like the father.
Yes,
in many ways.
grandfather,
He's
like Johnny Appleseed here, right? Planting SBOM kind of stuff all over the place. I thought this is sort of something that SBOMs are supposed to be helping with.
Yeah, you're right. It's definitely becoming a key element of software supply chain attacks and the things that you can do with that. We're seeing more and more vendors pop up that are doing something about either creating an SBOM or managing an SBOM, or aggregating a bunch of SBOMs and then allowing for you to submit that together. So yes, a software bill of materials is critical, absolutely paramount, sort of foundational, if you will, to software supply chain management and security. But that's just one element of it, right? So whether you're creating it from your own code, whether you're trying to create one from third-party code, that's the initial process, right? And so then what do you do with it? Because remember, as Alan's echoed for over a decade, an SBOM is just an inventory list, right? It tells you what's inside, just like an ingredients list, but it doesn't tell you what the next step is, right? It doesn't tell you what's vulnerable within there or what's actionable that you need to address right away. And so it's a multi-pronged process to really get your arms around the software supply chain security aspect of things. But I completely agree. You can't act on anything until you know what's inside, which is what an SBOM helps you really do, whether you're doing one yourself or you're getting one from a vendor that you can then, to your point, verify.
So, we could probably have a whole full day discussion on
this.
What SBOMs and how they work, how they should work, all of that. I want to hear more about this new Grammatech platform, though.
Yeah.
Take us through. So I got an SBOM, big deal. How are you helping me with that?
Right. So we launched. So as I mentioned, I joined here about 3 years ago, and we had a sort of a legacy product, Code Sonar, that's done really well in the static analysis space. That investment for us continues, and because of Shift left, that product's getting a lot of adoption as well. But we decided to expand the portfolio and launch a new capability based on some work we had done with DoD CIO office back in 2016. And so we really leveraged the basis of that. And we created Code Sentry. And Code Sentry is really about creating an SBOM, identifying open source components, vulnerabilities, and educating the customer on what's inside, third-party applications. So obviously there's source code SCA, and we've seen that space evolve and mature and become more mainstream, Black Duck and many others. But that's really applicable to the source code that you're building. What about the binaries that you're getting from your vendors or your tier 1, tier 2 providers if you're an automotive company? What about applications you're bringing in-house that you are going to deploy to 100,000 workstations? How are you enabling any kind of trust within those? Are you just looking at a spreadsheet with the BSIM, output from the vendor? Are you now going to look at their SBOM and just trust that? So what Code Sentry does is it takes various types of binaries, archive files, zip files, EXEs, DLLs, shared objects, you name it. It covers desktop, mobile, embedded, web, firmware. And so all of those different type of input files can be ingested by Code Sentry. And the very first thing it does as it analyzes those files individually within an archive is it tells you what open source components reside within the EXE, for example. And so that's step one, right? And step two is once we've identified that, we tell you what version is part of that open source component. Then, of course, we are equipped now to tell you what CVEs are associated to that, vulnerabilities tied to, let's say, OpenSSL, 113J, for example. And so all of that data that we can give you is all tied to our ability to be able to dissect, different types of binaries. And now you get a report at the end of this, an SBOM being an example of a type of output, to where you now have visibility to what's inside, an application that your whole organization is using. Historically, you've either depended on the vendor and trusted them, or you've had your pen testing team manually hack away at it for weeks or months using a variety of open source tools and things they've created. But what we can do is we can actually take that application and we can go through it and tell you anything and everything that's open source. What is it? What version is it? What license is it associated to? GPL, LGPL, and then obviously, vulnerability data associated to that. So that's really the uniqueness of this tool compared to others in the market. But at the end of the day, all those tools are a key part of the shift that's occurring for software supply chain security capabilities.
Absolutely. Vince, where is this in terms of available to the public? How did they engage?
Yeah, so we launched it last year. We've already seen some pretty significant adoption, especially in government and a few other verticals that you would think have to know what's inside those kinds of applications. The whole notion of trust but verify, really applies to certain verticals right away, and that's really where this technology is resonating. So yeah, it's been out for about a year. We just launched a version last month, which is why we thought it was good to get in with you guys here as an example. Is now we cover all those different computing platforms: desktop, server, mobile, web, embedded, firmware, different types. And so because you could be an embedded customer, you could be a customer that just wants to scan COTS applications that you're acquiring before you deploy them. We have government agencies that are working with vendors and they want to scan GOTS applications, government off the shelf. Sure. We have software vendors that are building a game or a complicated system. It takes a long time. They can create an SBOM for what they're building, but it's kind of a mess because it's taken them months or years to build that. Whereas if you use a tool like this at the tail end of your SDLC, now you get the output of that right away, as far as open source components, versions, vulnerability information, license information, remediation information. We even go far as to sort of things like social risk score. So is this vulnerability being talked about in a social setting, right? In different types of social settings. So a lot of things that we provide visibility to that you typically don't have.
I love it, man. Hey, for people who we're running low on time, but for people who want to get more information, Vince, should they just go to grammatech.com or where within the website?
Yeah, I mean, grammatech.com, we've got a couple products listed there. Code Sentry is the product that this interview is about. And so that really is the product that helps you understand your risks from a software supply chain perspective, produces SBOMs for, end applications, production applications, binaries, whatever you want to call them. And so, this is a very nascent space. So there's a lot of education still occurring. A lot of people in your audience probably don't even know what an SBOM is. But so it's early, embryonic, as we know some analysts like to call it, but it's going to catch fire. And to your point, it's kind of all the rage in a lot of these conferences and, so on and so forth.
Absolutely. Hey, I just going to put you on the spot. Spell Grammatech for me.
GRAMMA Tech,
TECH.com. That's the website, folks.
That's right.
Hey, Vince.
Good luck with this. I know it was your first time on, but don't be shy. Come on back. Keep us posted. This whole software supply chain, I think 2023, and we put on a show in January every year called Predict, where we talk about what the big stories are coming up. I think software supply chain is going to be a big part of 2023. Our own Techstrong research team will be talking about it. Maybe we invite you back for that. But keep us posted, and best of luck with Grammatech.
Absolutely. Thank you, Alan, and look forward to our next time together.
All right. We're going to take a break on Techstrong. We'll be right back.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hey, everyone. Thank you for joining us for another Techstrong event. I am happy to have Lorelei Catapan from Active State here on Techstrong TV. And it's her first time on, so let's welcome her. Hey, Lorelei, how are you?
Hey, Alan. I'm good. Good. Thank you.
So, Lorelei, you have the honor of being, I think, the first Active State person we've ever interviewed on Techstrong TV. So it kind of falls on your shoulders then to carry it. Tell our audience a little bit about Active State. What's the company do?
Absolutely. So Active State has been around actually for at least 20 years. It's gone through various journey, have pivoted a couple times, and now Active State is in the open source, securing open source supply chain. And where we're at is essentially solving the problem and the pains of dealing with open source dependencies, whether that's Python, NPM, and so forth. And what we provide is, we provide the solutions for all software vendors to ensure that the software that they're building is secure, from source to components, artifacts, binaries. And that's where we really are, where we shine. We have a secure build service that allows you to input all of your dependencies. And then we build all of those dependencies from source, ensure they all build correctly. They build in a hermetic, secure way, and produce for you a reproducible runtime. And all of the artifacts have attestations and provide you the SBOMs. So, you may have heard developers, they love using open source, but what they hate is having to deal with the dependency hell, deal with ensuring that there's no tampering on those dependencies that they're consuming for building their software. And that's what Active State does.
How timely. I mean, that's certainly a big issue today, where, when you have the majority of the code in a lot of these apps actually being open source components, and those components themselves are not kind of monolithic. They're made of yet other components and
Exactly.
artifacts and scriptlets and what have you. It gets messy really quickly, right? Trying to figure out what the heck's really in there. That's great. Hey, Lorelei, before we jump into the latest news out of Active State, I wanted to give people a little bit of your background, because this is an area where you've been involved in for a while.
Yes. So I'm a developer at heart. Right out of college, I was a programmer, developer, software engineer, became an architect, and then eventually got into product, where I really found my passion, and specifically in the domain of DevOps. And, I spent a good chunk of my time in a couple startups, and then moved on to Oracle, where I was there for about 13 years, from Fusion apps to middleware, and then found my way to JFrog, and really loved the products that they sell. And that's where really I found my passion. So spent some time at JFrog for 4 years before joining Active State. So, I'm really passionate about DevOps, passionate about solving the pains that developers are dealing with day in, day out, as they build their software, especially with the secure software supply chain now being front and center, and developers wanting to just code fast and be innovative and so forth. And now there's security that they have to deal with. And so my passion is to help them become a developer again, and become a secure developer. So
cool. All right, let's first of all, thank you for that, and thank you for the background on Active State. Let's jump into the latest news from Active State. They recently had an announcement. I don't want to steal the story. It's your story. Why don't you tell the folks about this latest innovation?
Absolutely. So, with the recent news from the executive order really putting down the hammer on securing all of the software that all U.S. government agencies are consuming and using, ensuring that there's attestations, ensuring that they have SBOM in place. And with Active State now having had 20 years of experience in this space, we feel like it's finally come there. We feel that we were at least a couple of years ahead of any other vendors out there in this providing this kind of solution. There's also, I don't know if you're familiar with Salsa. So they provide, it's essentially starts for supply chain levels for software artifacts. And so what they provide are frameworks and best practices to ensure the integrity of artifacts. Specifically for any kind of artifacts, including open source artifacts. And so having both of those, we've really positioned our solution and our value proposition around that. And so what we do is essentially we turn, open source from source, building from source all the way to the binaries. And that's that. And so the recent releases that we've done, we are now providing SBOMs, software bill of materials, for all of the dependencies in your runtime. So what Active State does is it provides you a runtime that has all of the dependencies that you need to be able to run your software, be able to develop your software. And then soon after that, we have now released the ability to have attestations for every single artifact that you're using or you're consuming for your software. And so this is the biggest thing. We believe that This is something that every software vendor, especially those that are providing services or providing software to the U.S. government agencies or U.S. government contractors, are going to need. And so we're very excited about that the recent release, and we're going to continue to expand on that as the standards evolve.
Sure.
So yeah.
What's interesting is, and I've been through this, right? I had started a cybersecurity company in the early 2000s, sold primarily 70% of our business was DoD and various other agencies. And what was interesting is you see rather quickly that oftentimes the standards that the feds adopt, that, the federal government adopts, rather quickly becomes industry standard too, right? Next, after that, usually the financial industry says, wait a sec, if they're doing it, we should do it too. And then it's the healthcare industry. Now you got financial, healthcare, manufacturing, and who's left, right? So this does usually, and especially we see it happening with software supply chains and SBOMs and all that. We're seeing rapid awareness and involvement across all industries to say, hey, we got to know what's in here, right? So that we're not the next victim.
Right. Yes. And dealing with direct dependencies, sure, it's a little bit challenging. But then once you get into the transitive dependencies and all of the C libraries that they depend on, right? The native libraries, depending on the operating system that you're dealing with, whether it's Linux, Windows, Mac OS, that's when it becomes really challenging to be able to build and ensure that all of the dependencies and transitive dependencies for your runtime is there. And, they all play well, especially when you have a software with a very large set of dependencies. That's when it can become a big challenge. And that's where our customers are really seeing the value of the platform, is having this reproducible runtime, being able to build all of their dependencies, and then now having the attestation SBOM in place such that they can trust the runtime, the software that they're getting from Active State.
Got it. So I asked you this off camera. I might as well ask you on camera. Obviously, JFrog, where you used to work, has Artifactory, right? Probably one of the most famous, most widely used repos in the world, strictly for artifacts. How does this complement or compete, or is it just two separate things?
It's really a complementary. Yes. Mm-hmm. It really does complement JFrog Artifactory in that. So what we provide is also the ability to create a private repository or artifact repository that contains only the dependencies that you need, or the developers are that the things, the components, artifacts that your developers should be consuming from. And this could be vetted out by your AppSec, your CISO, your security engineers. And so, as you know, Artifactory can proxy, if you will, other remote repositories out there, such as PyPI, NPM, JCenter, and so forth. So we could become a vetted catalog, a curated catalog with all of the dependencies and artifacts that the developers can then consume from. So it's another remote repository that Artifactory can proxy that will contain all of the dependencies that you have to build your software, ensuring that there is attestation for each of those artifacts.
Excellent. Very cool. Hey, Lorelei, for people who want to get information, what do you recommend they do?
So absolutely get on our website. There is a free tier that you can sign up as a self-serve free tier. You can try it out. There is ability to try the SBOMs and attestations in place. Just sign up for a demo, and then we will ensure that your subscription does have those features in place.
ActiveState.com, ActiveState.io. What's the website?
I'm sorry, activestate.com. Yes.
Excellent. Thank you, Lorelei. So, and there's a free tier too, man. What more can you ask for?
Exactly. There's a free tier. Try out, get your hands on the platform, and we'd love to get the feedback from developers, from CISOs, from AppSecs, and definitely want to hear from them and provide if there's any gaps. Definitely want to hear them and start working on them.
So I want to emphasize, though, this isn't just for government folks, right?
Anyone who's
Absolutely.
interested.
In software supply chain and attestations and SBOMs and so forth should be looking at this.
That's right. Attestations, the whole security factor is just one value proposition that we provide. The other value proposition is, again, getting through dependency hell, especially if you're building for across different operating system, and the ability to really resolve your dependencies, making sure that they build from source. This is something that we provide. The other value proposition is this reproducible runtime. So, for example, you may have new developers coming into your team, and it takes them some time to set up their development environment. Well, with the ActiveState platform, it takes no time at all to be able to, spin up a runtime environment for your development and start coding away for and contributing to your software.
Got it. Great stuff. Hey, Lorelei, I want to thank you for being a guest on Techstrong TV.
Thank you, Alan.
The last time, come on more back and keep us posted.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. And I really appreciate your time there.
Not a problem. We'll take a break. We'll be back in Techstrong in a moment.
CISO Talk, to hear how real-world CISOs are dealing with today's real-world issues. From enabling secure remote workers to accelerating secure cloud adoption, defending against a pandemic of security attacks and beyond. CISO Talk covers the cyber topics you want to learn about. With your hosts, Unisys CISO Matt Newfield and MediaOps CEO Alan Schimmel, featuring a revolving panel of CISO cyber experts. This is where CISOs talk. Join us on digitalanarchist.com and techstrong.tv.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hey guys, we're back at the Open Source Summit in Dublin, Ireland. We're going to be talking with Ana Jimenez Santamaria, who is the program manager for something called To Do. And we're also going to be talking about a lot of research that they just came out with or about to launch. And it's going to be an ongoing project. And then hopefully all you guys will want to participate in. Ana, welcome to the show.
Hi, welcome. Thank you.
So the research program that you guys launched does what exactly? What's the goal? What's the thought process here? And is this going to be global for that matter?
Yeah, so today we just announced that OSPOCon, that is one of the micro conference happening here and at Open Source Summit, the OSPO survey. So we have been conducted at the Tutor Group this over the past 5 years. So these are the results of this year's survey, and we are trying to get the pulse of the OSPO adoption across regions and sectors. How is this evolving in Europe, but also in Asia Pacific time zones and regions, and also in the States, in Canada. So how this adoption is evolving worldwide, and where are the challenges, and if organizations implementing OSPOs are seeing actual benefits of creating this centralized place where open source is catalyzed and structured, and see how is this evolving.
Are you seeing different patterns in different geographic regions? I mean, or I guess not all folks are the same, but do they lean one way for some things and for others? And what's popping up?
Yeah, so indeed we are seeing many difference. So to give you some context, OSPOS initially started, it's a decade old. And initially started in the States in software big corporations, AWS, Microsoft, Google, all of them, they have really structured and mature OSPOs. And in fact, the story of To The Group is that it started as a group of organizations having an OSPO, and they wanted to build this common place where they share common resources, best practices, in a transparent way to help them and also help others in their OSPO journey, those organizations that they don't know how to start an OSPO and they need this guidance. They can go to all these public resources and even share their learnings and contribute to them. So we've seen that from this big corp-only resource that was 10 years ago, it has evolved a lot. Now, for instance, in the recent results, we have seen that OSPOs have critical. It's a critical key adoption for small organizations in their engineering teams rather than in big corporations. And that is really interesting because, for instance, in Europe, most of the organizations are not big corporations. They are small and medium ones. And over the past years, we've seen that this transition that OSPOs are not only for big corporations, but they can be also important for small to medium-sized companies, because it's more not about the team and building a full-time employees with 10 people, but it's more about, is your organization really into open source? Is it really putting efforts into funding open source and take open source seriously? Are they adopting a strategic posture around open source to increase this continuity of the program and on the open source efforts? And that is what an OSPO is. So if any organization, no matter the size, really cares about open source and all the security and legal aspects and community building, and they really understand the value of giving back to the community and not just consuming, this will be starting an OSPO. And I think in the recent results, that is something that we are seeing. We are seeing this kind of mindset, change in the mindset and the evolution of the OSPO.
A lot of companies, it seems like the spirit is willing, they just don't know how to actually go out and do something in open source and participate with these things. So is this part of the equation, is you guys are just trying to figure out a way to make it easier for companies to build these programs, get off the ground, including all the legal paperwork that goes with that, and it's not just about having a bunch of developers that are happy to contribute code. There has to be some mechanism to make it all happen.
Yeah, indeed. In fact, an open source program office existed to build these policies and processes that are also so needed in many organizations. In fact, I was reading some minutes ago the latest report of the Europe Spotlight results, and they were saying in Europe that many governments and public institutions, they have really issues in having clearance on the open source policies and processes to follow. So an OSPO can be this vehicle of starting building these processes and policies and give this strategic vision before doing open source ad hoc. So it's that step of moving from open source ad hoc, like, oh, my developers, because organizations knows that developers are using open source, and it's like, oh, okay, let's see how can we reduce risk, and that's all, but we don't care about anything else. So adopting an OSPO is a way to moving from this open source ad hoc to become more a strategic decision-making partners and infuse open source learnings to the whole organization, because it's this layer of I'm the vehicle to translate open source to the whole teams, to all the different teams. So the value of open source, it's clear, and there is this change of mindset in the entire organization.
It's also become an issue because developers want to work for people who contribute to the open source community, And so it's not just a nice to have for the company, it's actually becoming a little more strategic, at least as I understand it, because developers are voting for their feet to go work for companies that contribute to open source. So is that part of the math that goes into creating a program?
Oh yeah, indeed. There is a question in the survey results that are the states like what are the benefits of building an OSPO. So those organizations that have currently an OSPO, I think it was number 2 benefit was to recruit and attain talent. I think also if you filter between regions, I think that was mainly for Canada and States OSPO organizations, while in Europe the main top benefit was driving innovation and digital transformation. But in fact, it's clearly one of the many benefits an OSPO can bring to the organization.
So in your research that you've done, what surprised you? Was there anything in there that you didn't expect or that kind of leapt out at you and wow, it said, I never would have thought that would happen?
So I was reading that in Europe there is I think it was 44% of respondents said that they didn't invest in open source mentorship and talent, and I saw that like a really a big issue. And this they didn't have it didn't differentiate between they had an OSPO or not. They were just saying like, we know open source is important, but they are not investing in talent and mentorship. And I think this is one of the main first things you need to do if you really want to have the organizations really understand open source and contribute back and engage in communities, and also have the team understanding that and know how to contribute. So I see that as an issue, and maybe an OSPO can be a solution for that, since an OSPO, it's this place where the organization, if they have problems or issues about open source, they can rely on them, and they can also act as this mentorship ambassadors and educators of open source. So might be a potential way to ease and to help with this issue of lack of mentorship in European regions.
Yeah. And part of the issue becomes if I don't know how to engage, then I can't give back to the community, and that results in this conversation we're having about the imbalance that exists between all the organizations that are consuming open source but not helping to maintain those projects, and they find themselves dependent upon 3 or 4 people who are overloaded, and we just don't have the mechanisms in place to help those people through these types of programs. So it becomes kind of almost a virtuous cycle, I would think. So is that part of the thought process, is educating people about, hey, if you keep using all this software, you're going to have more log4j issues because not enough people are contributing to these projects, and this is the mechanism to fix that.
So I would say OSPOs act as these partners of and advise the organization on which open source projects matters to them, which open source they should be taking care about, and if they care about and they are using it, how to give back to the community. So at some point, OSPOs are great resource to open source sustainability, in my honest opinion. I've known OSPOs that they have been creating great initiatives to help open source sustainability. For instance, this is public. Spotify OSPO launched the FOSS Fund to fund independent projects and maintainers from independent projects, and I think that is a big win for both, for the organization and also for the open source ecosystem, because thanks to this centralized place inside the organization, they have voice for the organization, and they are helping to nurture these open source projects that maybe they cannot be sustainable in the long term, but thanks to these organizations that are giving back, and they keep training the organization of what are the next steps to be open source first citizens and build healthy relationships with the open source ecosystem. They can also invest in open source sustainability.
All right. Anna, thanks for being on the show and sharing your insights.
Yeah, thank you so much.
All right. Guys, you heard it here. The way to do the right thing is set up your own little open source program office, and these guys will show you how. Thanks for watching, and we'll be right back.
Looking for a live conference focused on the tools, technologies, and practices most important to your business? Innotech conferences are live one-day business and technology conferences highlighting the latest in trends for IT leaders, developers, and IT professionals. Each event combines education, innovation, peer-to-peer networking, and the latest technology and business solutions for a diverse IT-focused audience. Innotech conferences occur throughout the year in strategic regional locations, bringing together technology professionals from various industries to learn about the solutions, practices, and tools impacting their day-to-day work and gain insight into what's to come. Presenters at Innotech conferences are selected and curated to ensure each session provides the most up-to-date and relevant information without any hype. Whether you're interested in digital transformation, cybersecurity, cloud, IT leadership, or DevOps, Innotech conferences deliver. 2022 events are scheduled to be held in Austin, Dallas, Oklahoma City, Houston, and Washington, D.C. Innotech conferences are produced by Techstrong Live and powered by Techstrong Group.
Hey everyone, happy Monday. Cody J. Brown here with some upcoming programs from Techstrong Learning. First up, kicking off tomorrow, Tuesday, November 11th at 11 a.m. Eastern, Sumo Logic brings you an expert panel titled AAA, Analytics, Automation, and AI Ops. Our speakers will review experiences using AI Ops and anomaly detection and discuss how analytics are the foundation for great observability. Following at 1 p.m. Eastern, Chronosphere is joining us on DevOps.com to tell us why distributed tracing doesn't have to suck. As we continue to move away from monolithic architectures, it's become evident that we need to reevaluate how we search for and identify issues in our workflows. So let's take a fresh look at distributed tracing. And last but not least, Thursday at 3 p.m. Eastern, tune in for Overcoming Release Management Transformation Challenges. Waterfall update releases have shown themselves to be slow and problematic in our fast-paced digital age, and moving to more frequent, smaller patches comes with a set of obstacles all its own. Our panel aims to help you start small to overcome these big challenges. That's all I've got for you right now, but we do have plenty of upcoming and on-demand programs for you here at Techstrong Learning, so stay tuned.
Previously on Engineering the Change.
The program at Boca Code was amazing.
My career is completely changed from barely being able to, hold down a job to now being sought after by some of the biggest tech companies in the world.
Boca Code has built me up.
If you grant me the scholarship, like I said, I will share my knowledge with people, with women or immigrants.
Dreamed of having an opportunity to show the world, how great I can be.
I feel that anything I do my best in. So wherever I end up, I'm going to do the best I can to make sure I'm making a positive impact. So this scholarship would definitely assist me in changing the trajectory of my life.
Excited to tell Carly about her winning. She is so pumped to really embark on her career as a software engineer.
All
All right, Carly, we got the whole camera crew with us. All right, come on in, guys. We're coming in. Carly, I'm sorry, your name?
Harold.
Harold?
Yes.
So we're making this presentation of $10,000.
You got it?
We got some puppies. Just come right in.
Is this?
Sure. Oh, yeah, camera.
Huh? What?
Puppies coming over here. Hey, how you doing? Donald, we're here. Hey, man. How are you? I want to present you with this.
Oh my gosh.
We had a tough time. We couldn't pick the finalists. You guys are all great. You're really great engineers. So you're in.
Oh my gosh. Awesome. Thank you so much. This is a very awesome opportunity, and I look forward to strive for the best. Awesome. Thank you.
You're going to be a great engineer, man. Thank you so much, Donald. You know, this was by far the strongest class of people we had who applied for the scholarship. We were able to get it down to 3 finalists, but then in meeting with the judges, we couldn't pick a winner. So what we decided to do is just pick all 3 finalists as winners, and so we want to make this contribution to your life. And we're going to award Stephanie Sanchez as one of our 3 Spring 2022 winners of the Engineering the Change Scholarship. Stephanie, congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Hey everyone, I'm Alan Schimmel, CEO of Techstrong Group. We are a tech media company based here in Boca Raton, Florida, and we have been for 8 years. I've been a resident of Boca Raton for 20 years now, and it's always been one of my hopes, aspirations, is that South Florida would become a tech hub. So we opened this program, it's called Engineering the Change, to underserved communities including women, people of color, but any underserved community in the tech space, right? When I look back, and we have some of the past winners here with us, and I look at the difference it's made in the community, in their lives, it's something to be really proud of.
So, one of the things that Boca Code really takes is partnerships with companies like Techstrong and other local companies, because we need them to, to help support the school, and we need them to, to hire and interview our students as well.
We're going to introduce some of our past winners and just have them briefly talk a little bit about, how their life has gone since taking this class.
When I received the scholarship, I had a lot of mixed emotions. I was scared but excited for this new chapter. I had worked in the tech industry, but I had never been in an engineering role. The people at Boca Code, Todd, who I affectionately call Coach, because I kind of think of him as the coach in a game, they guide me step by step the whole process. When I graduated from the cohort, I had over 10 offers from tier 2 and tier 1 tech companies, and I had my pick, which was the first time in my life I really had to make a choice where it was completely my decision.
The scholarship changed my life really from 0 to 100. As I said before, I was in a state that I was really lost in terms of my career. I had a neuroscience degree from FAU, but I couldn't get a job. Once I got the scholarship and I did the 10 weeks at Boca Code, it completely changed my life to better, because now I have found actually my passion, which is not just tech, but being able to help women get into this field.
Winning the scholarship was once in a lifetime opportunity to change my career. The program at Boca Code was amazing. I studied a lot of fundamentals of software engineering, and I proved myself that I'm capable of being a successful developer. At that time, I couldn't even imagine how I would need this job in 3 months when the war hit my homeland, Ukraine, and this salary of software developer gave me opportunity to help Ukrainian people in this hard time.
So this year, we wound up with 3 finalists for the scholarship, and we brought them into our panel of judges, and each of the finalists were interviewed And then the judges got together and we had to pick just one. We tried to pick just one, and we really couldn't pick just one. And there were three outstanding candidates. And so what we've decided is to give all three of them scholarships. First person is Carly Dorless.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. So
I'll hold the check for you.
I will do my best to be successful and to help other women and other people.
Our next winner of the Engineering the Change Scholarship for 2022 is a gentleman named Donald Vizio, and Donald will tell you his story. Donald, come on up.
First of all, I want to thank Techstrong, Todd, for introducing me to the scholarship. And, this is an amazing opportunity coming from Haiti. And I hope with this opportunity that Techstrong and Todd introduced me to, I hope to introduce it to others just like myself and give back to my community and show them that, software engineering is cool. It's not just for nerds.
Our third winner for this year's Engineering the Change Scholarship is Stephanie Sanchez.
First of all, thank you both for this opportunity, and congratulations to my fellow recipients. I know we're going to make a significant change in the world. I come from a background of social work, and so I hope to be able to continue to put the people aspect in technology as we help others around us. I'm so grateful to be able to be a part of this. Thank you.
ContainerJournal.com is the leading online destination for centralized computing-related content. ContainerJournal.com covers all aspects of software containers, from container management, data management for containers, container security, networking for containers, to the entire container ecosystem, Kubernetes, microservices, serverless, and more. ContainerJournal.com has the largest selection of container-related news, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.containerjournal.com to learn more.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hey guys, thanks for the throw. We're here with Peter Manny, who's Chief Strategy Officer for Stamus Networks, and Eric LeBon, who's their CTO. And we're talking about a new book that they have published that helps people navigate what's going on with the open source Cicada intrusion detection, intrusion prevention system. Gentlemen, welcome to the show.
Hello, Michael. Hello, everyone.
All right.
Hello, good to be here.
Eric, let's start with you. Why did you feel the need to write this book? There's clearly existing documentation, but what is it that you're hoping folks will take away from this?
Yeah, so if you look at the excellent documentation from the Suricata project that describe all the intrusion detection system, all the network security monitoring capabilities of Suricata, you have to read 600 or 700 pages that are meant to be used as reference. So what we wanted to provide with this book is a coverage of what we think is important with Suricata in a shorter volume with easily accessible chapter where we describe different things that you can do with this software.
Peter, do you think the adoption of this type of platform is on the upswing or downswing? Because we've been talking about intrusion prevention and detection for, feels like a decade or more. And it's always number 3 on the list of things that people do, but it's usually below the 50% adoption rate. But what are you seeing these days in terms of intrusion prevention and detection? Are we taking it more seriously?
Yeah, absolutely. Especially with the rise, the past decade, shall we say, of all sorts of malware threat actors. But you bring on a good point, actually. One of the advantages of Suricata is it has multiple benefits when you actually deploy it. And one of them is IPS, but it can also be a full-blown network security monitoring engine, whereas it will not only generate alerts, but all sorts of network protocol forensics that could be used by incident response teamers. And to be very honest, that's one major part of why we actually made the book, because we actually incorporated some of that knowledge in there, which is good not only for beginners but also for advanced users. Kind of experience from the field, if you will, that we hope many folks will find it useful.
Eric, open source is widely used in just about every IT sector there is, with perhaps maybe the exception of cybersecurity. So are we starting to see more usage and reliance on open source in the security space? And if so, what's changing?
I think people are working more and more on working together. They want open format to exchange. So even if open source cybersecurity was something really there since really long, it is increasing in usage because as people want to work together, they are using open source tool and open standard to communicate. So we see, I think, a large adoption of tools like Suricata because it's easy to implement and you can scale it super fast and you get a lot of information, a lot of data that are really valuable for the companies. So I think this is this mix that you are not bound to the vision of one editor, but you can build your own set of tools and mechanism and process to have a solution that fits your organization.
All right. Peter, are the bad guys getting more sophisticated, or is it just the volume of attacks is increasing? Or I guess I would like your perspective on, are we winning or losing this here cybersecurity war?
Yes, the attackers are getting better and the volume gets bigger. We definitely need to actually keep up the fight for sure, and that's what a lot of us and colleagues are doing, both out on the field and we just have to keep at it. There's no other ways around it, because if we don't do it, it will mean that we basically gave up, and that's not what we're about to do. That's not what we will do. We're not in that business and business of quitting, and we just keep up the fight against the bad guys. And this is why one of the reasons is actually we incorporate knowledge from actually the field and experiences from different that we had from different some of the biggest cyber exercises in there as well that we find useful. And we hope the reader will also find it useful as well.
Eric, do you think we're going to rely more on automation and AI going forward? And does that have a role in this platform? Because we hear about the shortage of cybersecurity people all the time. So how are we going to level the playing field?
The shortage is real. That's really a big problem. And for instance, at Stamus Networks, the company where we did co-found with Peter, we are working on helping on top of Suricata to have something that requires less work for the people. So less people can do more stuff, more analysis, more detection with our product. And to do that, you need some process, you need some algorithm. And yes, machine learning and stuff like this are a solution for this problem. That's not the only solution, but it can help. I don't really believe it can be a silver bullet. We have seen a lot of vendors that claim to only use AI when they're using, in fact, a mix of technique, because it's by mixing technique that you manage to have a bigger coverage of a threat and then manage to lower the task and the amount of work that is needed for the cybersecurity analyst.
Peter, how big is this open source community and how do people get involved in it? Because it seems like there's just a lot of places to join, but what are you hoping for? What are you looking for?
Well, actually, our strength comes in numbers and versatility when we're talking about blue teams, defenders, and that's what we do. In the cybersecurity aspect of it. So you can. Our community is actually global. We have people from all continents, all time zones. There is always somebody that will be there on either on chat or on the email or on the forum ready to help out. There is a live Discord server chat and a forum.io Suricata. You can get all the help that you need to get. Plus, including there's a high chance that there's always somebody that have already done a similar thing that you're trying to figure out or able to answer your question. So that's always kind of helpful, knowing that it's handy and knowing that it's there. We have constantly grown our community. And we're actually, next week, we have one of our annual conferences, which is Suricon, and needs to be held in Athens, Greece. And these numbers always grow, and we see more interesting ideas, more interesting exchange, and that's where the real power comes in. Because with open source, you can actually you do that. You open it and you share it for suggestions, ideas, collaboration, and that is a huge enablement in the cybersecurity industry, I believe.
Eric, what's that one thing that you see people doing that makes you just shake your head and go, I can't believe we're still fighting this issue or still struggling with this particular issue? I guess I'm asking you, what's your pet peeve of the moment for cybersecurity?
I would say people not complaining. People think that things are as they are, on things we cannot do a change. Exactly in line with your idea or discussion on open source and community. If you start to exchange, if you start to think that you can make a change only maybe just by complaining and better by contributing, then things start to progress and move fast. So that's something I start to say since a few years now. Please complain. Just say that things are not okay, politely, and then maybe people will find idea to fix it or will fix it. And sometimes it's something that is not usable, and in 10 minutes of code, you've got a fix when you know how to do it. So yeah, please complain.
All right, Peter, as a follow-up to that, do you think the cybersecurity community in general has gotten a little too passive? Do we need to get a little more aggressive? I mean, what's your sense of the mood of the crowd?
Not necessarily passive. We're just getting hit on from all sides, to be very honest, which is normal and expected. But I believe one huge potential plus could be in collaboration. More collaborations, more integrations, more openness about what we're trying to do and how. And that ultimately comes to feedback, a feedback of tools, techniques that I use, what kind of works, what doesn't, and get that all sorts of experts from different parts of the field kind of on it and discussing and making sure it's beneficial for everybody and we move on forward with it. But that is not going to happen without actually openness and collaboration. And feedback is hugely important. One of the benefits of the open source Suricata as well is like the base of it is open source. So actually that enables a lot of feedback and a lot of complaining, as my colleague Eric mentioned. So, but that it always helps if different professionals from parts of the field actually collaborate and we do more towards integration. I think that's one of the keys there.
Eric, how do we achieve that goal? Because the bad guys are clearly collaborating much more aggressively than the good guys are. And the good guys, a lot of times in the security industry, they hold their cards close to their vest and they don't necessarily share. So is there something we need to do where maybe, we just put everybody in a room and figure out some way to collaborate? Or what's your best advice or
What's your dream list wish of ways of collaborating?
So I'm from France, so European. I think there is a strong movement. Maybe I'm a bit biased because I'm from the open source community, but I've seen so many big names associated to collaboration between entities. For instance, if you take the project that is MISP, Malware Information Sharing Platform, it's just about multiple organizations sharing threat intelligence, sharing tactics from attackers together at a large scale. We are talking about some MISP instances with the biggest name in Europe, governmental and companies that are working together to exchange the information faster than the attacker can exchange their information on their side. So I think this is a big plus. That's something that should spread out far more to be even more efficient. I know that there is some people that don't want to share information because they think that it's going to be a problem for them. But at least if some are doing it, make them benefit from their finding, it will help everybody. And I think that's really something people should work more on, sharing information. You got level of trust in this kind of tool where you can just share exactly what you know is not touching your intellectual property or any of critical part of information about your information system. So yeah, please try this method, and I think you can have better result. If all the company from one sector work together, they will work together against attackers that do exactly the same, like going after all the hospital, like going after all the aeronautics industry. This is campaigns that are often done by state or by mafia at the same moment with the same target. So we need to work the same way.
All right, folks, you heard it here in the spirit of the book, Cybersecurity Sharing is Caring. Gentlemen, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you.
Pleasure being here. Thank you very much.
All right, back to you guys in the studio.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hey guys, thanks for the throw. We're here with Ann Schlemmer, who's the newly appointed CEO for Percona. They're a provider of some services, and they also curate open source instances of various databases that are out there, and they make them enterprise class. And we're going to be talking about what are the challenges in bringing open source databases into the enterprise these days. And welcome to the show.
Nice to be here, Mike. Thanks for having me.
The enterprise, as we know it, has always been full of various commercial databases, and folks are making that transition to open source databases. But from your perspective, what are the challenges they face? What do they need help in? And what is your sense of the momentum for making that shift to open source these days?
Well, what we see at Percona is continued adoption on open source. And there's various reasons as why the enterprise, I'd say in today's environment and what's going on with the economics, everyone's looking at cost for sure, right? So total cost of ownership is something that's there. But on top of that, you want to have making sure that there's security as well as availability. And I would also say just reliability on that side. We continue to see the momentum not across just the enterprises, but also in the government space as well, of some mandates of saying moving over to open source. So we see that momentum there, but we also see that developers continue to drive more of the adoption. They want to be going to market as quickly as they can. They just expect the database to work. So over the past 10 to 15 years, we definitely have seen a change in the market that way. So open source allows for innovation, quicker innovation for sure is what we've been seeing here at Percona.
Who is managing these databases once they get deployed? Because frequently, to your point, they are brought in by a development team, but then they move on to their next project. So are we still seeing DBAs in the enterprise, or are people relying more on managed services from somebody else to manage the database, or is the developer team just taking ownership of that as we shift proverbial left, as they say?
Right. We hear in the market, I haven't heard as much recently, but a couple of years ago, it was like, is the DBA even a role that's needed anymore? We're going to say it is, but the developers don't care about it. Like I just said, they just expect it to work on that side. But we do see within the enterprises, there are definitely teams that are managing the infrastructure. They need to have that database experience, but some are coming to folks like Percona, coming to us for the managed services, that we continue to have that deep DBA database expertise that is harder and harder for folks to find at the enterprise level, right? To staff it that way. Also, with the advent of the cloud, there could be that perception of, again, it just works, the database works, while self-service and spinning up a database instance is great. It doesn't guarantee that you're going to have the performance that you need. It's not performant. It's not necessarily dealing with your configurations. So that's where we see our strength in bringing together both software and services to help with that expertise that, frankly, is maybe being shifted over to SREs now or DevOps on that side of it. So keeping that expertise in-house is more challenging than it used to be.
All right, well, you said the magic word for us, so let's jump into it. What is the role of DevOps teams when it comes to managing databases these days? And we hear a lot about data ops. Is that becoming a thing? And is data ops and DevOps two sides of the same coin? What's your perspective?
My perspective is sometimes I like to just step back a little bit and say, what really needs to get done? While I made the comment earlier, potentially devs don't want to think about or care about the database, it's vitally important for your product, right? For their mission critical applications, you need to have a strong database on that side of it. So I believe that in that DevOps space, you're still going to need that area of expertise. And maybe you farm it out. Maybe we continue to evolve in the database space where with database as a service and looking at that and that self-service piece, how do we continue to evolve in terms of, I don't want to overuse like machine learning and automations, but how do we get those automated remediations and things like that, and using that information that we have to be smarter and to self-heal on that side of it. So is it going to move completely over to the DevOps teams and those groups of folks? I think it remains to be seen. It continues to evolve, but I think it's going to be a mix of using the technology as it continues to get smarter and smarter, but also it still is a vital role, and it has its own segmentation that needs to be cultivated and mindful of.
Yeah, so to your point, the whole process, regardless of who's managing, is going to get a little more automated as we go along, and we'll see more and more of these algorithms thrown at various things. To that degree, just how automated can automated get from your perspective as you kind of look down the road a little bit and maybe a little over the horizon, but what should we expect?
I would say at Percona, what we're seeing is that mix, right? We talk about let's automate those things that might be more manual so that we as humans can dive into some of those challenges that are uniquely served and solved by us as humans on that side. So I personally don't believe that there's going to be full automation there. We're going to need that expertise to talk through things, because what we see at the enterprise, while there's scale, there are different use cases and edge cases that, depending on what your application is, we bump up against. You see people pushing the limits all the time with technology on that side of it. So I think that there's going to be a mix where you're going to need that personal intervention and some of that services side complemented with the automation piece of it.
So you're newly ensconced as the CEO. I'm sure you got a great plan rolled out and raring to go, but maybe it's unfair to ask, but what are you thinking about for the future of the company right now? What do you think are the strategic goals, and where do you hope the company will be in a year from now?
Well, as I'm in this transition, even though I've been within Percona, it definitely is a new role, and I'm taking the time to listen to the team, but then also formulate and executing on the plan that we've had in place. So we're continuing. We have rolled out this year our Percona platform, which is that marriage of software and services. On that side, we're continuing to build that out, meeting the market where it's at, and serve, looking at a database as a service and self-serve on that side. When I project out and think of where we're at, I've been thinking a little bit also on our 3-year timeline, not just our 1 year or 15 months, if you will, looking at between now and exiting 2023. But I see us executing on the plan that we have in place that we've put out there, continuing to bring value to our users and our subscribers in that market. Again, database as a service for private on-prem mix is key to our continued success right now in the near term. That's what I see.
We hear a lot about issues related to, quote unquote, more contributions being needed from enterprise organizations into these open source communities. And that can take a lot of forms and can be just financial support. It could be documentation or whatever. What do you think it is the challenge that enterprises are having in making contributions to these open source projects? And is that something you can facilitate?
Well, I think that I would say not unique to Percona or any organization is prioritization and focus, right? So in terms of the mindset of contributing to open source, I think that any open source project needs to be structured in such a way that it's easy to contribute, right? So if it's a challenge to get that contribution in, you're not going to see it. But it's also up to the various projects for ourselves at Percona, making sure that we're reaching out to the community and talking about what if someone wants to contribute, say, a feature request in there, we want to make sure that it's not, again, just an edge case. Like, how is it going to help the broader user audience on that side of it? And we haven't seen traction within enterprises being willing to talk about being good stewards back to open source because they're seeing the advantages of it for their companies as well, and understanding that nature of the community and giving back. But part of it is on the project owners themselves to make it easier for contributions to be made and having that dialogue and how to help out that side.
And what about the open source community itself? Are there things you wish that the maintainers and contributors were doing that would maybe make their efforts more compelling for enterprise organizations, or at the very least, a little more focus on areas where they tend to maybe not find as sexy, like security?
Security might not be sexy, but oh my goodness, it hurts when it hurts, right? I would say it's probably less exciting to be that headline that there was a data breach on your side of it. So it's one of those things that we definitely need to pay attention to. I think that from the contribution side and giving back and what do large project owners need to do? I think there's many in the market that are very good stewards on that side of it. But there's also, as you may be well aware, Mike, there's a lot of debate within open source in general. Is it a business model? Is it a philosophy? What does it mean? We like to think of free as in freedom, not in, there's value there. People should be able to make money and monetize. But how do you go about doing that, right, in a proper way? So that's probably a whole show you can do and have an interesting debate in panels as we go back and forth on what that looks like and how to do that. But I think that allowing I'd say the premise of open source and it being a win-win, it's not a zero-sum game, allowing everyone to innovate freely is when open source is being used at its best. And I think that there's opportunities for everybody to make money in that sense as well. So how do we do that in a responsible, respectful way is what we continue to strive for.
What is the one thing that you see organizations doing as they approach open source databases in particular, it just makes you shake your head and go, I wish we were a little further along in that. I'm sure you encounter a lot of companies by the time they get to you, they're probably looking for a lot of help. But what's the one piece of advice that you would give them that says, here's something you should be thinking about doing up front that would, alleviate a lot of this pain later?
That's an interesting question. I would say probably maybe doing it with a little more intent and thinking in choosing what you're selecting to use and thinking about it that way. Sometimes doing a little more planning up front saves some of the pain on the back end, but in the speed to market and the urgency of innovation, that's easier said than done. But I think that taking that time to think through and learn from others, right? Great to push boundaries. We believe in pushing boundaries at Percona all the time, but really understanding what the use case may be before you jump into something, I think would save problems in the long run for folks.
All right, a little adult open source supervision might be called for. Hey, Anne, thanks for being on the show.
Thanks for having me, Mike. Have a great day.
All right, back to you guys in the studio.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hey guys, thanks for the throw. We're here with Michael Gray, who's the CTO for Thrive Networks, and we're talking about zero trust. It's all the rage these days. The issue is, it's not something you can actually go out and buy. It's something you kind of have to build and enforce. So let's get into what it takes to actually achieve some zero trust. Michael, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
I think this concept's been around forever and a day. I think we tried to do it with hardware back in the day when we were going to lock down systems and everybody rebelled. But it's not like I can actually buy something that just is zero trust from the get-go. So what exactly do security folks and IT people need to be thinking about as they move to zero trust, and how do we get there from here?
Yeah, well, first and foremost, I think that this reminds me of SD-WAN from 5 years ago. It meant 10 different things to 5 different people. And so, the first thing you want to think about is what trust what, trust who? And I really think, believe it or not, zero trust begins with a little bit of asset management. All right. So what are the resources that we're trying to protect, and who are the identities that are trying to access those things? I think when you can answer that question, even conceptually, I'm not talking about running out and buying a bunch of asset management software, but literally sitting down Excel or even, good old fashioned pen and pencil and saying, these are my most critical assets, and these are the identities that need to access them. I think that's a fantastic starting point. Before we go out and buy any solutions, is just try and understand what the landscape is of the things we're trying to protect.
A lot of this also sounds like, to me, it's really a focus on identity. I mean, it may be a machine identity, it may necessarily be a user, or could even be an application, but is this kind of the variation of an identity-centric approach to security that we've been talking about forever? We're just now calling it zero trust.
Well, I think it's identity plus the flow of data. Okay, so if you've got those identities sitting out there and you're managing them, that's great. Well, what data do they need to access, and how do they get there? And I think what a lot of people end up finding is, there's still some legacy applications out there, and that flow of data is not as straightforward as they maybe hoped it would be when they set upon trying to implement zero trust. So I certainly agree with you when it comes to the fact of, yes, this is identity management at a somewhat precursor to everything else you're trying to do. But again, how do those identities get from where they're going to that data that they need to do their jobs?
Do you think, as we get to this whole idea that people go, well, that sounds great, but then when they start investigating it becomes rather complex. So can they actually do that today? And who can do it? Is it really large enterprises? And, what is the market for this at the moment?
Yeah, I think they can. And, I sort of mentioned that it meaning a bunch of different things to a bunch of different people. A lot of times people will start with, I want to make sure that only corporate laptops can attach to my corporate network, and they'll call that zero trust. And I certainly understand that. There's certainly much deeper integrations of zero trust. I think they can get there. I don't think they can get there 100%. Even on the SMB side, you don't necessarily need to be just an enterprise to get there. I think the area that most organizations can get to is, well, I know I have these three critical SaaS applications, and I can make sure that it's a corporate identity on a corporate device going through a secure channel to get there. I think when it comes to trying to have zero trust across every single application and every single instance of a user trying to get there, that might be difficult. But what I think in the end, they'll probably end up driving to is, well, maybe it's time to get rid of some of those other applications and try and consolidate down to a top 5 or 6 so that I can achieve my plan of getting to zero trust across, the majority of my environment.
Is a lot of this also therefore going to be a reason or an excuse for that matter to kind of revisit a lot of the security policies that have been in place and things that people kind of, almost ignored or didn't want to deal with because it was too complex, and now they're realizing that it just can't be ignored anymore?
Yeah, and that's absolutely the case. And I see elimination in a lot of those legacy platforms, because what they're finding is their security state or their potential security state is just too large to try and close all these doors. So instead of trying to close all the doors, why don't I shrink the number of doors that need to be closed? And that we're seeing a lot of success. And, maybe a couple of years ago, people might have said, well, it's too hard to go to a SharePoint or a Dropbox away from my on-prem file server. And then when they think about the complexity of securing that old legacy channel, they say, well, maybe it wouldn't be so hard for employees to change and transform. Once they become open to it, they start to see some possibilities. And then they also see that on top of all this, little simpler to secure maybe than some of those legacy channels. So, people I think are really coming around. Where we are now with hybrid work, I think they're seeing possibilities that they didn't see before. Maybe they got forced into it a little bit, but that's not the worst thing that could happen to technology anyway. So, I think it's actually pretty exciting that, maybe zero trust is fueling some digital transformation. And I think that's fantastic.
Do you think it's easier for security people to have this conversation? Because not too long ago, security wasn't really high on the list of things that people used for buying criteria for anything. And is now the nature of that conversation starting to shift because the C-level folks are starting to realize and appreciate the enormity of the issue?
I do. And obviously, people have certainly woken up, certainly at the C-level, the risks around security. I do think what's underlying zero trust in a way, especially if it's done, in a somewhat delicate manner, a thoughtful manner, it's actually more convenient for folks. If you're set up a very specific way and your zero trust is not adding a lot of friction, I think people might actually like it a little bit better. Oh, it recognizes who I am, and thus I can get right to the data that I want to get to without having to jump through a bunch of hoops. I think people actually appreciate that, even if they have to change a little bit. Hey, you can't use your home machine anymore, or you can only use your home machine to get to your email and nothing else. I do actually think, unlike some other security controls that C-level or IT may try to put in place, zero trust, there's a convenience factor underlying it if you can get it right.
When you go down this path, what's your sense of how long will it take to get to zero trust? I mean, most organizations, and do they realize that we're really talking about maybe not weeks and months, but several years before we sort it all out?
Yeah, and I think the reason that's sort of where I started, which is, do you know what you're trying to secure? There's a saying, security, if you don't know what it is, you can't secure it, right? If I don't know where the doors are, how can I lock them? And it's those organizations that have an understanding where they are with technology that can actually move a lot faster towards zero trust. Otherwise, you are spending quite a bit of time doing simple things like inventorying applications and inventorying data, inventorying identities. These things take an awful long time, because I think when those organizations that have not been doing that kind of asset management, they start to play catch up a little bit. They start to step back and realize how much they have, and then they want to clear up how much they have or consolidate how much they have. and then set up on zero trust. I think a lot of that precursor is where all the time gets consumed. You may say, hey, let's go to zero trust, and realize you have 5 or 6 other large IT products before you can even start that process. And that's why these things drag on for years.
Do you think that as we go along, we're going to need to rely more on machine learning algorithms to find all this stuff because the estate is so big and we don't necessarily know what all these assets are and what the apps are, or even for that matter, what users are doing what, when, and where? And maybe it's too big a job for a human to figure out. So maybe we need a machine.
It is. And what I would say is, the foundation is usually shifting underneath you. So while you're trying to close and consolidate all these old solutions, there's new solutions being brought in. So it requires certainly a lot of agility on the IT teams. But yes, I think if you're going to go down the path of zero trust, you do want to include some amount of machine learning based on risk. So is there something about this user that seems risky to me? Maybe the IP address they're coming from is malicious. And many of the zero trust solutions, especially when it comes to identity, already have some basic machine learning in the background that can do some of those analytics on the fly for you. And again, I think this ultimately helps end users, right? Maybe they don't have to MFA 6 times because there's just something about me that the machine learning sees that knows I'm safe or unsafe. And bring all these factors together with machine learning, yes, that's impossible for a human to do. And you will actually need some technology to help you there.
Do you think the bad guys are well aware of all this and they kind of just look at us and smile to themselves and go, we're talking about all this wonderful stuff that you guys can buy and use to defend yourself, but fundamentally, the lowest hanging fruit is pretty simple to exploit. So they're not even going to bother going to do all the more complicated stuff.
Yeah, I don't think the arms race is coming to any sort of end between us and the bad guys, so to speak. But what I think is happening is people are waking up a little bit. Is not just about the technology, but it's about the implementation of the technology, because that's where I see a lot of weaknesses, where you went and bought the highest end piece of technology and it was not implemented correctly, or it was missed as far as something that needed to be protected was not protected. And I see that over and over again. And that's really the human element when it comes to security. It's fantastic to make an investment in a SaaS solution, piece of software, piece of hardware. But if it's not implemented and monitored, bad guys will just sit there and laugh and say, but you left this other door unlocked and I can easily go through it. You have all the bells and whistles, but there's just, one chink in the armor, so to speak.
Are we getting better at turning this more into a team sport on our side? Because, we've got the IT operations people are more involved. The application folks are more involved. So is this becoming something where it's just not left up to the security guys by themselves to figure out?
I do actually see progress being made. Maybe if you can imagine for a moment, IT presenting on a project to, move things forward from a digital transformation standpoint. Whereas before, people might look at it and say, well, that, we drive a lot of value for our business. I think now that those C-suites are saying, this is all great, but is it secure? Right. And, 5 years ago, they might not have been saying that. And I do feel like IT is getting a little bit more support, IT operations getting a little bit more support than they used to. And organizations are realizing where they used to take chances around risk, it's not going to work out, right? That's a casino game that they're going to lose. And so they're asking the right questions. Now, we still have a long ways to go. So a lot of really insecure things happening, but there is a little bit of a tide turning here that, hey, maybe we can come together and at least attempt to make things more secure. Whereas before it was a little bit more of an afterthought.
So what's your best advice to folks to figure out how to get to this zero trust nirvana that we're all seeking? Where's the beginning?
Yeah, it's super basic, and it's an interesting term that people, may not in the C-suite may not hear every day, but it's threat modeling. You can do threat modeling on the back of a napkin. You can sit down and say to yourself, what is our most critical asset, our most critical data, and what would happen if that were compromised? And then sit down and sort of talk through that as a team. It is a very basic thing that people can do. The things that come out of it are, well, what is that critical asset and how are we protecting it? It really drums up a lot of really good questions and say, okay, well, how do we know the people that are accessing that critical piece of data? How do we trust the people getting to it? It's a pretty simple thing to do. It is not something that takes 10, 12 hours. You can actually do threat modeling in 45 minutes. It's a very straightforward exercise. And of course, IT can help you. They would actually probably welcome that discussion of, yes, well, what do you feel our critical assets are, C-suite, versus what do we think they are? And how do we come together and actually say as a team, as a whole company, this is what's most critical, and this is how we secure the users that are getting to it.
All right, folks. Well, you heard it here. The good news is Zero Trust is really an opportunity to start over. Think of it as a giant mulligan in the land of cybersecurity. But as always, you still got to start at the beginning. Hey, Michael, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you. Good to see you.
All right, back to you guys in the studio.
Hi again, everyone. I hope you all enjoyed today's episode of Techstrong TV. We had some amazing interviews with industry professionals to give you the latest in the tech world. We'll be back again tomorrow, so we hope to see you then. But in the meantime, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. As always, stay strong. Techstrong.